Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Work Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about growing a franchise business. I'm here with Dave, all over from Salt Lake City, I shall say, compare 86 degrees here in Palm Desert. Dave, please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us about your company.
Hey there, my name is Dave Pazgan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Liftology. Liftology is a franchise organization, and our business model is that we sell and install access and mobility equipment, things like stair lifts and wheelchair ramps and platform lifts and other types of equipment that help people stay in their homes longer or be safe while they're navigating their homes and communities.
I'm always amazed when I see similar equipment to what you're selling. Obviously, this is a relatively new business that you joined, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've been in this industry for a long time. This is my second round of building a franchise in the industry, and so I know the space pretty well. But Liftology's, we were just getting started. We started offering franchises in October. We've got our first couple of locations going through training right now.
Incredible. That's going fast. Godspeed right there. Tell us a story about the Liftology. Obviously, the very, very incredible, very, very good name, I shall say, for the
Yeah.
company so I'll be curious to hear about how the company name came about and also what made you start this particular franchise, this particular company model.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the kind of origin story. So, as I mentioned, I've been in the industry for a while. About 15 years ago, I started up really the first franchise in the access and mobility industry. That's a company called 101 Mobility, and they've gone on to become the biggest in the space with about 100 locations throughout North America. And I had left that company in 2020 and worked on some other things, but I got reintroduced or was interested in getting back into the industry right around this time last year for a couple of reasons. One was that I kind of missed it. I really enjoyed the business. It's a classic, do well by doing good kind of business. So,
Hmm.
the way we help people is really profound for many of them. So I was attracted by that and I kind of missed that part of it. We also through the years have developed really strong relationships with our suppliers and the manufacturers we work with. And so, those were good and productive and enjoyable relationships that I kind of missed as I'd been out of the business for a while. And so, and then probably the third element is that the industry is about to grow quite a lot. We've got what's called the silver tsunami. So there's
Hmm.
26 million or so people over the age of 80 right now. And that's about to become about 76 million people over the
Wow.
next decade because you've got the baby boomers for the very first time are turning 80 this year in 2026. The first wave of baby boomers are, turning 80. And so there's a lot of them. And so this industry is expected to grow pretty substantially over the next couple of years or couple of decades, really, because most people, as they get older, want to age in place. They want to stay in their home as long as they can for a variety of reasons. Some of it is just, familiarity and lifestyle reasons. Some of it is cost, the cost of assisted living and nursing home care and those other factors are getting pretty expensive. And so in many cases, even if a lift or some sort of equipment can help a person stay in their home for an extra year, it might be a massive savings against the cost of, selling the home and maybe buying a home in a retirement community or moving into an assisted living facility. So those are really the main reasons that I decided to get back into the industry. And I was really fortunate that I had a chance to reconnect with some other people with a lot of experience. So I have two partners in my business. It's a husband and wife team. Their names are Jen and Gordon Rainey. And Jen and Gordon happened to be franchise owners at my last brand, 101
Hmm.
Mobility. They ultimately sold that company to the home office right around the time that I left in 2020. And so they live here in the Park City, Utah area. And I had reached out to them when I was starting to investigate getting back into the industry. And they were really interested in working with me to build the next franchise in the space. And that brings a lot to the table for me personally because they know the ground game. Like I've always been more on the franchisor side of things. So I know and understand, the mechanics of building and scaling up a franchise company. But what they're experts at is the mechanics of building and scaling a liftology business from the ground up because they've done it very successfully in the past. And so having them help out with franchise support and training and building models and strategy and all of that type of stuff is really instrumental. And circling back to your question about the name, it was actually Jen Rainey that came up with the name. I'm a big fan of the idea of differentiated brands, differentiating yourselves visually and, with naming conventions and all of that, I think can help you stand out in the crowd. In our industry, the number of companies that are called XYZ Mobility or XYZ Access or something like that, that's kind of the standard approach to naming. And I like the idea of having a brand that is more of a pattern interrupter. You may be familiar with the Purple Cow book, right? So,
Yeah.
the Purple Cow is a great book about. I won't tell the story. You can read the book, but
Yeah. Yeah. Go
the
ahead.
idea is that if you're driving through a field and you see a bunch of cows and one of them's purple, it's going to interrupt your pattern, right? You can be like, "Wow, that's
Exactly.
that's a purple. What's going on with that purple cow?" And so that's the same idea behind the name Liftology. Is it is differentiated from what's typical in our marketplace, and it's funny how people react to that because as we were starting to introduce it and roll it out to particular our manufacturers who've been in this industry for sometimes up to 45 or years or longer. They kind of were like, "So you're sticking with that Liftology name, huh?" And we're like, "Yeah, we like it. It's got a ring to it. It's kind of interesting and different. It's not super descriptive, so we still have to explain ourselves a little bit, but at any rate, it is somewhat different than what's typical in our industry."
So many thoughts that I want to share with you here. I'll distill it to just four. First of all, I have to confirm that the name is proper. The moment I saw your email or the end of your email with Liftology, it started a conversation at our lunch table right away, and I was like, "Oh, that's a really cool name." And we started looking you
Mm.
up. I mean, the company website and everything just made sense. 2 seconds, I knew exactly what it is and who is this for. The name is absolutely important is still so for everyone who's looking to pick a name, you don't have to spend $100,000 like Apple did or Steve Jobs did for a logo or a company name, design, whatever, but spend a little bit of time. And I like the analogy to the purple cow because yeah, that's if you see a purple cow, you're
Yeah,
gonna notice it and you're gonna remember it. And that's going to be a story. I mean, this book was written what probably 20 years ago.
yeah, it's a
And
very old book. Was that Seth Godin? I think wrote that book a
it
long
was
time ago.
Seth Godin. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and
I mean,
it's
it stands out.
yeah, the process that we went through, it was a real process. It wasn't kind of random. We intentionally wanted to come up with a name that we could all sort of rally around, but also met the criteria of giving some sort of indication or being relevant, not a totally abstract name, but something that's relevant to what we do, but also is differentiated. And so we had at least 150 ideas, and what's funny about that process, though, just I find this super interesting, is we had, let's say, 150 names, and we were all kind of like, well, I kind of like this one, I kind of like that one. And then my partner Jen threw out the name Liftology, and we all were like, aha, that's it. That's
There
the
you
one.
go.
And we immediately gravitated to it and knew it was the right one. So,
Absolutely. There's when it clicks, and obviously clearly that name clicked. But that also reminded me of the story how Tim Ferriss came up, since we mentioned books, came up with the title for his book, The 4 Hour Work Week.
yeah,
He ran a Google ad and saw to an empty page, essentially saw what made people click, what people essentially would be interested in, and that's how it came out. So yeah, it's very important. But those three
yeah,
other thoughts that I had, first of all, shout out baby boomers. We hope you will have a really peaceful times, and hopefully there will be the company that we're discussing, the products that we're discussing today are going to scale enough so they'll reach your city and you'll be able to live comfortably for the next decades to come. Second of all, I agree with the cost. You've mentioned cost briefly, of essentially providing that help to someone who needs it. And we were personally doing research in our family for in Poland, and turns out most of the places that would provide care and help cost two times, at least two, 3 times more what's the essentially a good social security pay is
yeah,
for someone. So it's still require, in other words, it still requires a big involvement, financial involvement from the family, and not only time commitment, obviously, physical commitment, also money commitment. So that's something that we should definitely talk about. And third of all, I'll be really curious to hear on the business model. Most of the companies that end up going into the franchise path, they have built essentially, they start with one location. The traditional way that I always had in mind is that you start with one location, you perfect it, you spend some maybe years or longer on this one location. Then at one point you start realizing, hey, maybe I can scale to different cities, to different regions, but the concepts work. If we package it correctly, we can essentially give this opportunity to someone like you found the power couple there in Utah that will
yeah,
take this model, leverage it, and essentially build it around their area. And you went straight franchise? I mean, you started around the same time last year, so it's been 12 months and you're rapidly growing. So how does one approach a business that you knew from the get-go that, hey, this is going to be a franchise model. We're not going to
Yeah.
start with one or two locations that I'll fully control and then scale from there.
Great question. And our approach is really atypical. What you described was much more common. Someone has a small business, it's going well, they want to replicate it, they start thinking about franchising. Not every business makes sense as a franchise. So there's a lot of great services out there, franchise consulting firms that help you determine if your business really makes sense as a franchise. When we started 101 Mobility, my first company, I worked with a company called the iFranchise Group, and they helped us solve for that. So we did it the traditional way the first time around. We had a mobility business. We were looking to expand. We didn't really know much about franchising. We decided to approach franchising as the way to scale the business, and we got some qualified expertise to help us get it all figured out and put the pieces together because we really didn't know what to do. And so I worked with Mark Siebert and Dave Hood there, the co-founders of that company, all the way back in line to build that franchise. And that was really helpful. We learned a lot through that process and really took that more traditional approach. But so that's most common. This time around, we felt like my partners and I have a pretty deep understanding of the industry. And we also have really strong relationships with our manufacturing partners. And that's all coming from our prior experience. So the first time around, the company that I built has, become like the number one buyer for a couple of the manufacturing partners that we work with. So I personally had some credibility there. And so when I approached them, around this time last year and pitched them on the idea of what I was working on, and my first ask was, hey, if I were to go do this, will you guys work with me? Like, you help us and be a key supplier because the best manufacturers in our industry are pretty selective about who they'll work with. They're not just signing up dealers just to sign them up, pretty cautious and careful about that. And so that was really big question in my mind. Like if I had, gone to these companies and they said, nah, it's too new, or we don't really get it, or we don't really think this is the right fit, I probably wouldn't have bothered, even though there are many other companies that make some of these products. I know who the best ones are. And so we wanted to work with the best of the best. And unfortunately they were keen to work with us. And so we were able to work that out pretty quickly. They very quickly said, yeah, we were definitely interested in partnering with you. So that part was actually pretty easy. But I think that it's to your point, it's not really common to start franchising a business model if you don't have a native business already up and running. But between my partners and myself and our experience, we felt like we knew enough about how this really operates day to day. And, we had all been out of it for a few years, but not long enough to the point where much had really changed. Our industry is pretty steady, stable, and it is subject to some product innovations over time, but it's a relatively slow grind. So it's not like changing algorithms in Google, for example, which are minute by minute, things can change dramatically. But the main product that we offer is a stair lift, for example. And the fundamental operation and installation and sale and support of a stair lift hasn't really changed much in 25 years. And so, we kind of know that and understand that. We know the market well. And then I think also we feel like just from a executive leadership standpoint, we've also got good experience there. I mean, we're just kind of good at figuring things out and being good problem solvers. Both of I don't happen to, but both of my partners have advanced, business degrees and, have worked in, Big Five consulting for a while, and they're just smart folks. And so, we felt like there was not really a need for us to wait and build a native business first. In fact, we almost viewed it as it would be a distraction because it's a whole different business than what we're doing now. Like running a franchise company and running your native business are two completely different kinds of things, which is in many reasons why the vast majority of companies that start franchising fail. Most of them fail. There's something like 300 new franchisors that launch every year, and the vast majority of them will fail. And it's mostly because the leadership of the native business becomes a franchisor, but it's such a different business to be a franchisor that they just have a hard time figuring it out, and it oftentimes doesn't work. And so we just, we kind of had this really rare combination of understanding the native business coming from my partner's experience, and then me having been in franchising for a long time and having a knack for scaling franchise companies. And I think that gave us an advantage over, others, where we can really focus our effort on supporting the franchise partners that we bring into our organization in all the right ways, and not necessarily distracting ourselves with, corporate stores, so to speak.
I love that. That makes all sense now. I recently had a friend, fellow business owner, who reached out to me, and he met with his business partner after starting a new venture online. I met with him for the first time in person, and it was such a disaster of a meetup, that misalignment, let's call it, that they essentially stopped working together right from the get go. And I say this because my next question is related to this some shape or form. How do you find the right, maybe ethical franchisees to join the company and build their own location?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a hotly debated issue in the world of franchising, because a lot of franchisors just try to focus on pins on the map, right? Sell more territories, kind of like at any cost, really. And that does, I guess, produce some results in the short term, but it really can be a disaster in the long term if you don't get
Mhm.
the right owners in your system. And so we have a very clear idea of what we're looking for. And I will say this, like at my first attempt at it with 101 Mobility, the first year we started franchising, all of the franchises we awarded that year are still there today, 15 years later.
Wow.
And so that's a combination of a little bit, we got lucky for sure, not only with the people that we brought in at that time, but also that the business model really worked out and made sense as a franchise, because it was a first of its kind release. So we got a little bit lucky, but we've now, learned a lot from that. And I've had it, having had the chance to observe uh, performance of literally hundreds of franchise owners in this industry and a couple of others over the last 15 years, you start to get a pretty clear idea of what works and what doesn't work, in terms of franchise owners and their skill set, abilities, and so on. A really key thing is their willingness to get and stay involved in the business. That's
Right.
one of the sort of fallacies in franchising. A lot of people that look to franchising think of it as, well, maybe I can get another additional semi-passive income stream. So I'll set up this franchise business and I'll hire a manager to run it, and I can have this, sort of free cash flow without having to do a whole lot. That rarely works, especially if you're starting up a new franchise location for really any business. It's going to take a few years of effort and time and dedicated attention if you really want it to be successful. There aren't very many, if any, franchises where you can just fully delegate the growth and startup of a business to a manager, hired manager, and expect it to really work. And so that's one piece is, owners that are really focused on putting in the time and effort to ultimately make this successful. The other key thing, well, there's a few things that we look for, but another key thing that we look for is that at Liftology, our entire DNA as a company is oriented around the customer experience, which historically in our industry hasn't been that good. The products are pretty reliable. The dealers have a tendency to not be as reliable, meaning that many stories of people who have tried to find, someone to help them with a lift or a ramp, and they may call around in their market and try to talk to two or three local dealers, and they'll not get anybody on the phone. People don't call them back. That's like a really common thing in our industry, is to have issues with just even getting somebody to answer your questions.
Yeah.
And so we have created, as part of our company blueprint, what we call our AAA proven process.
Mm.
And that sort of talks a little bit about the DNA of the company and like what we care about, and also a little bit about the owners that we're looking for. So the AAA proven process, the first A stands for, and it's actually written this way in the document, answer the damn phone. Like that's number
Mm.
one. And when you talk to our suppliers, believe it or not, many of them will tell you that, hey, if you can just get that part right, you're already at an advantage over most of the dealers in the market. In fact, many of these manufacturers had put resources behind trying to do lead generation. They don't generally sell to the consumer directly, they almost exclusively sell through dealers. And so they had put effort and resources into lead generation. And their biggest problem is they'll tee up a really great lead, somebody that needs a lift or a ramp, and they'll literally hand it on a silver platter to a dealer in that market. And then they'll follow up with the customer like 3 or 4 days later. Hey, how's it going with XYZ Mobility? Are they taking care of you? Who? No, I've not heard from them. And they're like, you got to be kidding me. Like this one was like,
Very common.
there you go. And so answer the damn phone is like the first A of the AAA proven process. The second one is act quickly to assess the need. Many times people have somewhat an acute or urgent need for this equipment. Like if you think about the situation that a lot of people are in, if you think about the industry that the situation that people are in many cases it comes as a surprise, right? A loved one has, fallen or has some sort of an issue, and they're maybe in the hospital and they're in rehab and they're about to be discharged, and they're having a conversation with a discharge planner, and the discharge planner is like, well, tell me about your living situation. Like, you're now in a wheelchair. How are you going to, where's your bedroom? Where's your bathroom? Where do you eat? Those kinds of things. And if the answers are all, well, my bedroom and bathrooms are all upstairs, how do you solve for that? And maybe this one that you're caring for is going home in 3 days, right? So it's a relatively short timeline to solve that problem. So acting quickly, recognizing that for many people this is an urgent issue is an important factor. So act quickly to assess the need. And then our third A of the AAA proven process stands for active ownership. So that goes back to the previous point, owners that are really focused on building and developing their business. It's their primary career and focus is to be successful in this business and pay attention to customers, and that's the formula we know leads to success. But we are zealots around creating an exceptional experience with the customer, starting with being there for them when they need us.
That's very, very powerful. And I love the customer centric approach, even as a franchisor, because obviously your customers or clients are franchisees, and still you want to make sure that you keep that quality congruent and consistent across the board. What is there a sort of package? What do you do to set your new franchisees for success? Is there a package that you provide them with, be it for SOPs and maybe operations, maybe marketing, maybe sales, anything that will really help them during the first 12 months to set them up for success so they can have a business, operational business, and
Yeah.
hopefully profitable business as well?
Yeah, I would say all of the above. It really starts with our training program. So we have a week long training program. It's actually going on right here in our office with our first franchises here this week. So we have a week long training program. It's comprehensive about the products and how to sell them and how to hire people and strategic planning and all of that. So it's a pretty busy week. We also work with our manufacturing partners who provide dealer trainings. Their training is a little bit more focused on the installation side. They do also provide sales training, extra dose of that sort of sales process training for specific to our industry, but they will also go to the key suppliers and get their firsthand factory training on how to install and install the products. And so it kind of starts there. Beyond that, we have packaged up programs around lead generation, around business development locally, because a big part of our business model is to work with referral partners that are in your market. So these would be hospitals, rehab centers, area agencies on aging, Habitat for Humanity. There's a long, long list of places that you can go and people that you can talk to that are encountering our customers who have these needs. And so we have a whole package and program around how to find and talk to those people. We support the setting those meetings. We go in the field with them to conduct those meetings to make sure that they feel like, hey, I know how to answer the questions and I'm not going to trip over myself here when a really important, meeting opportunity comes up. So there's that piece of it. And then we've also built a custom enterprise system that all of our franchise use called Blueprint. And Blueprint is a combination of an operational workflow management tool as well as a CRM. And that's probably one of the bigger key points and differentiators in our industry is that not very many of our competitors are using CRMs to manage their customer information. Most of them have some sort of operational workflow tool, whether that's an off the shelf system or custom built, but most of them do not have a top of funnel CRM type functionality. So we built Blueprint so that all of the lead information, customer inquiries, whether they come in over the phone or through a form or any other format, get funneled into Blueprint from the very top. And then the agent, the person who's working with that customer, can capture and manage that information. So they're using it to maybe set follow ups for later and, you know,
Mm. Yeah. I love that. Very, very well-rounded smothering with support. I love that phrase there. Plenty of good phrases to write down from today's episode already. And yeah, I agree. Speed to lead is so crucial, especially if you are operating on a local in your local area. So they say there's so many studies. For example, typical in that area, in that scenario, I would say probably Meta ads are going to be crushing it. Facebook, Meta, Instagram. If someone fills out the form, there's so many studies that if you give that person a call, text, or email, or all of the above within 5 minutes, the chances of you essentially having them pick up the phone and know who you are, what you do, are so much higher than if you would call that person an hour later or 30 minutes later. We already forgot what we did. So even if you filled out the form, you probably will not remember that you filled out the form 30 minutes later. And especially if you're advanced in life, let's say, and you don't know even what you're doing, but you see something that might be interesting to you and you need to get more information about that. That's very, very important to get that information right away because it's still relevant. I 1000% agree. Yeah, 100%. And there's platforms that make it so simple, like Slack, Go High Level, and notifications. Use AI for this for sure to make sure that you get notified, and essentially your AI agent, whatever, to make sure that you know someone that needs to respond. There's no excuse for it as well. Where do you see Dave Liftology in 10 years from now, or in other words, ultimately, what's the goal for Liftology? Oh, entrepreneurial operating system. Yeah. I love that. And I have to say at this point, Dave, that you're giving very specific, and you can say also precisely thought through answers to all of the questions. You know what you want, you know what your clients care about, and customers of each franchise. So I love that. I admire that. Very inspiring as well to know. I mean, you have to start with the end in mind, or end goal in mind, right? You have to know where you're going, and the map will reveal itself as you go. But you need to know the direction, the destination. I mean, love that. The last part of the conversation is a little bit philosophical. A few questions for you. First question is, in your journey so far, within the last 12 months of building new franchise again company, what gives you the most fulfillment in what you do? Love that. 1000%. And I can tell, I know it's been only a year for you guys, but it sounds and it feels like a company culture that is a company culture that everyone would love to work with. At least that's my impression so far. So I think you're doing a phenomenal job with that, and you're contributing to it a lot. And I think it's going to be going very, very well. And I wish you and the team much more success, and faster, reaching those 10-year goals faster than you would expect according to your EOS plan. So that's phenomenal. Next question: if you had an opportunity to sit across the table from Dave, who's just starting out, is there anything that you would share with him to set him up for success for his journey? Obviously, assuming I can imagine he needs to go through his own lessons, collect his own lessons. But what would you say to him? What advice would you share with him? Mm. Key team building and also self-awareness, I should say, are two key characteristics of every leader. So I think that those are great lessons for everyone here as well. Final question, since it's beginning of the year and feels already like February, regardless of that, what are you excited about the most in the near future? Can be business related, doesn't have to be. Yeah, journey itself. Spectacular, and I wish you definitely 20 or 30 trainings at the time, and hopefully again you'll reach your goals much faster than even expected, and no doubt about that. What's the best way for someone who would be interested in learning more about the franchise model that you provide to get in touch with you? Is that LinkedIn, or do you have any other methods? And you will respond within 72 hours. Absolutely. Love that. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your time, for stopping by, sharing your lessons. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to host you on the show. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys grow and succeed in the years to come.